Hi guys, and welcome to my big overview of Turkey. So I have finished backpacking Turkey now, and I hope you've been enjoying the videos. I've been enjoying putting them together and reminiscing over my time in Turkey. Whilst I have been travelling, I've been getting a few questions about kind of like how to travel around Turkey, best places to eat and best places to stay, how much I spent, etc. So I wanted to put a video together. In this video, I'm going to go over a few different topics. I'm going to go over budget, hostels, how to travel, a little bit of the local language and a few other bits and bobs. So I'm going to get right into it. Firstly, a few different points on money. So in Turkey, they do use the Turkish lira. You can, in some parts of Istanbul, use a euro, but mostly it's Turkish lira around the rest of the country. These prices that I will put in this video are all based on the time of filming, so please do check your currency exchange at the time that you want to travel. Most ATMs in Turkey do charge a transaction fee, so I found this to roughly be about 6 to 8% in most ATMs. There are some ATMs that do have free of charge withdrawals. Again, you kind of have to just kind of try it out. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they're not. So I'll put a list here of all the different ones that I found to be free at some points. Another thing to note about Turkey is that cards aren't widely accepted. So you can find that your cards will be accepted in some bars, restaurants, supermarkets, but it was very rare that I came across like a hostel that took cards. So you do have to bear that in mind, that you need to carry around quite a lot of cash with you. So let's jump into the budget. So I was in Turkey for 31 days, an amazing 31 days. In that time, I set myself a budget of 750 Turkish lira per day. That works out to be roughly 23,235 lira. So let's jump into the first category, which is obviously accommodation. That is where I spent the most of my money whilst I was in Turkey. So over the 31 days, I spent a total of 7,766 lira, which works out to be roughly 250 lira per day. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some accommodations that were a little bit cheaper and there was some that were a little bit more expensive. So for example, I spent a night glamping in Butterfly Valley whilst I was in Fethiye, and that cost me 650 Turkish lira for one night, and that was by far the most expensive place. So I also have a list of recommendations. So in Istanbul, I recommend Cheers Hostel. So this was kind of like a really good introduction into Turkey, really great place to meet people and socialise. Then in Izmir, I would highly recommend Lotus Garden Hostel. So this was very, very chilled. It was completely opposite to Cheers Hostel, but I just really liked like the area where it was. So it was kind of in a more local area and there was really good food around there. In Bodrum, if you do want to go to the port of Bodrum, then you will need to look at an Airbnb, but we got a relatively cheap one. It was really nice. In Fethiye, I would highly recommend Sakura. This is probably one of the cleanest, nicest hostels I stayed in. There's only 2 hostels in the Fethiye area. One is in Oladeniz and one is in Fethiye. I just felt like the vibe in Fethiye was a little bit nicer than Oladeniz. Oladeniz was a little bit more touristy. So if that's what you're looking for, then definitely stay at Sakura. Then in Antalya, there is the Gold Coast Hostel. I didn't actually stay there. I did book there, and when I turned up, they said that they'd run out of beds, so they put me up in another hostel. But I did go back there to have drinks and things like that, and it was really, really fun. I really enjoyed that place. And then finally in Cappadocia, I stayed at Homestay Cave Hostel, and this was probably my favourite hostel I stayed in my entire stay in Turkey. It's actually set inside of a cave, and obviously with Cappadocia, that is like the main attraction to the local area. So that was a really interesting, different stay. Very different to anything I'd ever done before. Now moving into the second biggest category, which is of course food. I'm a massive foodie, and Turkey was amazing for food. So over the 31 days, I spent a grand total of 5,765 Turkish lira, which roughly works out to be 186 lira per day, which is extremely cheap for the amount of amazing food I had. Honestly, if you want a holiday around food, definitely go to Turkey. So I've just listed out a few different foods here that are really worth a try. obviously we've got the Turkish kebab. I had so many kebabs whilst I was there, but a really interesting one that I had was, it was called a testi. So it's in a clay pot, and basically they cook it inside the clay pot and they have to break the clay pot to serve the kebab. Ayran, which is a yogurt drink, and it's pretty much served with every single meal in Turkey. It's very popular with the locals. Obviously you've got to try Turkish coffee and Turkish tea. Well, that was a bit of a tongue twister. If you walk down the streets, you will 100% see at least 500 Turkish men sat outside either drinking Turkish tea or Turkish coffee. It's a massive part of the culture in Turkey, so I highly recommend trying it. Baklava is a very traditional dessert in Turkey. We have manti, we have dolma, we have saksuka, which is kind of like a salsa, which is served with most dishes. Bulgar, there's loads and loads and loads of different types of bread. So one of the most popular ones is simit, and you will see little street vendors selling it everywhere pretty much in Turkey, and it's kind of like a bagel, and that's really, really nice. Gozlem, I still can't pronounce it, but that was probably one of my favorite things. It's basically a pancake and it's filled with whatever basically you want. Most of the time it's either with spinach or with feta. Pied is the Turkish pizza, so you may have seen this everywhere. It looks a bit like a boat, and honestly, I'm really sorry if you love Italian pizza, but Turkish pizza is now my new favourite pizza. It's absolutely delicious. They also sell börek, which is basically pretty much everywhere in the east of Europe and in Turkey. Again, this is like a pastry filled with either cheese or spinach. We have lahmacun, which is a wrap, and obviously we've got the Turkish delight. I've never seen so much Turkish delight in my life, and I don't usually like it, but in Turkey it was so delicious. So I highly recommend, even if you don't like it, give it a try, you might change your mind. So now moving into travel. So over 31 days, I actually spent a lot less on travel than I thought I was going to do. So I spent a grand total of 3,830 lira, which works out to be about 124 lira per day. That includes 2 flights. So I actually did fly from Istanbul to Izmir, which was 550 lira, which is super cheap, and it included baggage. And then I also flew from Cappadocia to Istanbul, which was 848 lira, again including baggage. So any domestic flights within Turkey does include baggage, which is an absolute godsend when you've got a 55-litre bag. So some of my main tips on travel are using Busboard for the buses. So I pretty much use that as my complete guide for any of the buses. They do have Flixbus, however it's less common and it's actually run through another company, and all of those are available on Busboard. I would recommend it if you are going to go from Antalya to Cappadocia to get the overnight bus. 1, you're saving a night on accommodation, and 2, it's a pretty long drive. It's about 8 hours, so you're better off doing it at the night time and just sleep right through it. One of my favourite things about the buses in Turkey is that they always give you free snacks. So the first bus that we got, we actually got given ice cream, and it was only like a 2-hour bus, which was fantastic. And then after that, you know, I got like iced tea, biscuits, little crackers and things like that, which was pretty handy if you hadn't had time to run to the shop before you got on a bus. There are no toilets at bus stations that are free, so you do need to carry around small change with you in order to use the toilets in most of the bus stations, and most of the time the buses do stop and you can just use the toilet there. The intercity transport is really, really good in Antalya and in Istanbul. So they have like a metro system and they have like a local bus. In some of the other cities, it was a little bit more tricky, but there was always like a way to find out. Sometimes they'd have like a little transit van and you just get in those, and you can use card to pay on pretty much all of the intercity public transport. So then moving into some of the more obscure categories. So first of all, there is entertainment. So when I say entertainment, I mean kind of like museums, walking tour tips and things like that. So over the 31 days, I spent 1,167 lira, which works out to be about 38 lira per day. Honestly, most things in Turkey are actually free to go to, unless they are kind of like the big excursions, which I'll go to in a minute. But yeah, if it does have a fee, it's usually really, really small, like 15 to 50 lira. In miscellaneous, so this is things like toiletries, washing, sun cream, and the SIM card. I spent a grand total of 1,030 lira. The biggest part of this was my Turkish SIM card, so I got 20 gigabytes for 420 lira. Now, I did get my Turkish SIM card at the airport because I didn't know how to get into Istanbul. I don't recommend doing that. I got really ripped off. So I know people who bought them inside Istanbul for half the price. So try to only get a SIM card in the airport if it's absolutely necessary, otherwise you will end up paying more. Next in this category is beers. So one thing about Turkey is the beer is quite expensive. So there's only really one local beer, which is Efes. So over the 31 days, I spent 2,780 Turkish lira, which turns out to be 90 lira per day roughly. Yeah, it's quite a lot. I did have a good time though. I never went completely wild. I think maybe one night was a big night, or maybe two actually. But over the space of 31 days, I was just kind of having like a few beers at the beach. Then I spent 587 lira on souvenirs. So as you guys know, I do like to collect my Christmas tree decorations, so pretty much that money was spent on that and presents for my little sister. Now the final category is big ticket items. So I did actually do two of the most amazing excursions whilst I was in Turkey. So I went and did paragliding in Uludeniz, and it's actually one of the only places in the world where you can paraglide over a blue lagoon, and it was absolutely incredible. And then obviously when in Cappadocia, I had to do the hot air balloon ride. So they were two big ticket items for me. So on a grand total, I spent 6,555 lira on big ticket items. I did go during the peak season, so these prices are a little bit hiked up in price. I do know people who have gone in the shoulder seasons and got it for cheaper. So the paragliding with pictures cost me 2,980 lira. Without the pictures, it was 2,550 lira. And then my hot air balloon ride in Cappadocia, I paid a little bit more again because the weather was quite bad for the days leading up, so there was high demand when I was there. But I managed to get it for 3,090 Turkish lira. I do know people who spent a lot more whilst I was there, so I did get a good deal, but it's still quite expensive. So that brings me to the overall what I spent during my time in Turkey. So I spent a grand total of 28,959 lira, and that works out to be 934 lira per day, which was quite over my budget. But I actually received my hot air balloon ride for my birthday, and I don't really want to include the paragliding because it's not something that everybody would do. So if I exclude those, I'd spend a grand total of 22,405 lira, which takes my budget down to 735 lira per day, which actually puts me slightly under budget. So yeah, it might be cheating, but I definitely think that you can do Turkey on an even bigger budget than I did. I did everything that I wanted to do. I didn't say no. I ate at really nice places, but then also cooked at home. I did try and budget, but I wasn't so strict. So I hope that was helpful. I'm now just gonna give you a few extra tips, bonus tips. So first of all, you definitely need something to cover both your shoulders and your knees. So in most of the mosques, you do have to have both shoulders and knees covered if you're a female. If you are a male, you just need to have your knees covered. It will also be helpful for women to have a scarf to put over their heads. Again, you cannot enter a mosque without your hair being covered in Turkey if you are a female. So it is worthwhile having a scarf, and also it doubles as keeping you a little bit warmer in Cappadocia, which brings me on to my next point is definitely pack a coat or a hoodie at least for Cappadocia. It does get a little bit chillier there. Most places aren't that conservative, so I know that before I travelled I was really worried about covering up and, you know, how much would I be able to wear my shorts and skirts and things like that. But actually in most of the places that I visited it was quite alright to wear pretty much whatever you wanted. Obviously things that were too revealing you might get a few stares and things, so just bear that in mind. Be polite, but you don't need to cover everything all the time. Some things to watch out: if you are going to get a taxi, make sure that you ask that it's on a meter. I've heard a lot of stories about people getting scammed within taxis. It seems to be a common theme within Turkey. So do be careful if you are going to get in a taxi, and just ask them and make sure it's on a meter. If you are going to go to a Turkish hammam whilst you are in Istanbul, go outside of the city centre. I went to this Turkish hammam and it was half the price, if not less, than all the places inside the city centre. People there don't drink the tap water, so if you do have like a sterilised bottle or anything like that, then do bring that. Otherwise just drink the bottled water in Turkey. Never eat at a restaurant that doesn't have the price on the menu. Obviously use the lockers in the hostels. Again, this isn't just relevant for Turkey, this is relevant for everything. Found them in most of the hostels, and just make sure that you carry a little padlock around with you. In terms of safety, I honestly found Turkey to be super safe. I felt really comfortable walking around by myself. The people there were some of the loveliest people I've ever met. They were super hospitable. Like, for example, if I looked dehydrated, they would just be chucking bottles of water at me. And yeah, they were just super nice. Obviously you have to be careful in all countries, and you have to keep your wits about you, so be sensible. Like, don't carry too much cash around with you. Don't parade around expensive things. They don't really tend to have iPhones there, so that's something that people might look at you for. But I never had any problems whatsoever my whole time in Turkey. I will put in here the route that I did. So I started in Istanbul, I flew down to Izmir, then I got the bus to Bodrum, then I got another bus to Fethiye, then I got another bus to Antalya, another bus from Antalya to Cappadocia, and then flew from Cappadocia to Istanbul, and that's where I finished my trip. And then finally, I just wanted to teach you a few of the different phrases, really basics, so that you can go to Turkey and be able to keep a very basic conversation. So first of all, hello, and that is merhaba. Then you've got thank you, which is teşekkürler, and goodbye, which is güle güle. And they were some of the words there. The Turkish people absolutely love it if you try, so do try and just learn even those 3 words. So that is the end of my overview of Turkey. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed my time in Turkey. It's honestly one of my favourite countries I've ever visited. The people are amazing, both the backpackers and the local people. The food is insane. I just felt super safe all the time. It's so diverse. Like, you've got Cappadocia, which looks like Mars, and then you've got the most beautiful beaches and the most amazing cities. So I do highly recommend visiting Turkey if you do get the opportunity. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. It's sad to put an end to this Turkey series, but I really do hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you when I land in Italy. Bye.